My girlfriend went live on Instagram and said, "I'm only with him for the green card. Americans are so easy to fool." A coworker recorded the stream and posted it. I came across the footage. She was deported before she had a chance to clarify anything. At her hearing, I testified that she had confessed to committing marriage fraud. My name is Mark, I am 29, and I work in IT support for a mid-sized healthcare company in Dallas. I live pretty quietly, gym before work, spreadsheets and tickets all day, meal prep at night, weekends split between friends and errands. My girlfriend is Alina, she is 26, and we have been together a little over a year. We do not live together, but she stays over a lot and has a drawer at my place. We started dating after she transferred into the admin team at my company through a staffing agency, so we overlap socially even when we try not to. Alina has a sharp way of talking that I used to call confident. If a waiter is slow, she makes it personal. If someone disagrees with her, she treats it like disrespect. She is funny when she is in a good mood, but when she is not, everyone around her becomes a prop in her day. A few months in, she started bringing up immigration stuff in a casual way. Not paperwork exactly, more like testing the water. She would ask what I thought about people marrying for documents, like it was a hypothetical debate. If I didn't give the answer she wanted, she would roll her eyes and say I was naive. Then she would pivot and act sweet, like she had just been joking. I ignored it longer than I should have because everything else looked normal. We went on trips. She met my friends. She posted me on her story. I told myself it was just her being blunt and online-brained. Last week, one of my coworkers messaged me at night asking if I had seen what Alina posted. He would not explain over text. He just said it was bad and that people at work were already talking. Then he sent a video file, not a link, like he didn't want it traced back to him. I watched it once, then again, because my brain kept insisting I misheard it. The video was a screen recording of her Instagram live. She was sitting on my couch with my kitchen visible behind her, wearing my hoodie like it was part of her brand. The camera was angled upward, and she kept checking her own reflection more than the comments. It started with her complaining about small things. American food, American work culture, American dating. She was in that performative mood where she acts sharper because people are watching. Then someone in the comments asked if we were serious. She laughed and said she was only with him for the green card and Americans are so easy to fool. She did not hesitate. She did not soften it. She smiled like she had delivered a punchline she was proud of. I waited for a correction. There was none. Instead, she added that I was stable and predictable, the kind of guy you can manage if you know how. She said conflict scares me, and that makes me easy. The chat filled with laughing reactions. She fed off it. I texted her immediately asking what she thought she was doing. She responded that it was content and that I should not be dramatic. 10 minutes later, she showed up at my apartment without asking, already defensive. She tried to frame it as satire. She said everyone exaggerates online. I told her it did not sound like exaggeration. It sounded intentional. She rolled her eyes and said I was proving her point by overreacting. I asked one simple question. If it is a joke, explain what the joke is. She could not. She kept saying, "You know how I am." I said that is exactly the problem. When she tried to grab my phone to delete the recording, I stepped back and told her to stop. That was the moment I made the decision. I told her she needed to leave. Not calm down. Not take a walk. Leave. She stared at me like I had broken script. She said I was being ridiculous and that couples fight. I said this was not a fight. This was a boundary. She refused at first, so I opened the door and said clearly that if she did not leave, I would call building security. That changed her tone. She called me pathetic under her breath, grabbed her bag, and walked out. I locked the door behind her. That was the first time I felt the shift from boyfriend to witness. After I locked the door, I stood there for a full minute just listening. I half expected her to start pounding on it or yelling in the hallway to make a scene. She did not. I heard the elevator ding and then nothing. That silence told me more than her words had. She was not confused. She was calculating. About 15 minutes later, my phone started blowing up. First texts calling me dramatic. Then voice messages saying I embarrassed her by throwing her out over a joke. She kept repeating that it was satire and that I was insecure for not handling it. I did not engage. I read the first few messages carefully, not emotionally. There was no attempt to understand why it crossed a line. No acknowledgement that saying you are using someone for immigration status is not edgy humor. It was all deflection and blame. So I blocked her. Calls, texts, Instagram, everything. Not to punish her. To prevent escalation. If she wanted to continue performing, she could do it without access to me. The quiet after blocking her was immediate and clean. No more vibrations. No more tone shifts from insults to affection. Just silence. About an hour later, she tried emailing me. The subject line said you were overreacting. I did not open it. I filtered it straight to archive. I had already heard her argument. Repetition would not improve it. The next morning at work, I felt eyes on me before anyone said anything. Two coworkers avoided direct conversation but kept glancing at their phones. Around noon, the guy from accounting who had sent me the recording pulled me aside and asked if I had seen that it was spreading beyond our department. That is when I understood blocking her was not the dramatic act. It was the minimum necessary step. Because once something like that circulates, it stops being about relationship tension and starts being about legal exposure. By mid-afternoon, the video had moved beyond casual gossip. Someone had reposted it on a public account with a caption about immigration fraud. It was not viral in the global sense, but it was circulating enough that strangers were commenting. Around 3, I got an email from HR asking me to come in the next morning for a conversation. The wording was neutral, but the timing was not. Since I had already blocked Alina everywhere, she switched to contacting mutual friends. One of them called me and said she was furious that I had cut her off. She told them I was punishing her for being outspoken. That framing was predictable. It cast her as bold and me as fragile. I did not defend myself in group chats. I did not post a counterstatement. I kept everything offline. That evening, she showed up at my apartment building again. The concierge called up and asked if I was expecting a guest. I said no. I asked them not to let her up. They confirmed she was in the lobby arguing that she lived there part-time. That detail mattered. She did not live there. She had no key, no lease, no legal tie. I went downstairs anyway because I prefer handling things directly. She was pacing near the elevators when I walked out. The second she saw me, she started talking fast. She said I had overreacted and that blocking her was childish. She said the internet had already moved on and I needed to grow up. I kept it simple. I said we are not together anymore. I said you cannot publicly say you are using me for immigration status and expect access to my home the same day. Her tone shifted again. She lowered her voice and said I was ruining her future over pride. That word future again. Not relationship. Not trust. Future. I told her clearly that if she came back without permission, I would file a trespass notice with building management. Not as a threat. As a boundary. She looked at me like she was trying to decide whether I meant it. I did. She did not argue with building management that night. She left after realizing I was not going to escalate emotionally. That was always her entry point. If I stayed calm, she lost momentum. The next morning, I went to the HR meeting. My manager and a representative from compliance were there. They had the video open. Paused at the exact moment, she said Americans are easy to fool. They asked me if I was aware of it. I said yes. They asked whether there were any immigration filings tied to me. I said no. I explained that we were dating, not engaged, and that no paperwork had ever been submitted. They were careful with their wording. They did not accuse me. They framed it as risk management. Because she was technically contracted through an agency that worked with us, anything suggesting fraud could reflect back on the company. Then the compliance rep said something that shifted the situation from uncomfortable to serious. She said that content like this sometimes gets reported to federal agencies by third parties. She asked if I had any reason to believe the statement was genuine. I answered honestly. I said she had previously mentioned marriage in the context of solving her immigration status. I clarified that I had never agreed to that and that I had recently ended the relationship. They documented everything. When I got back to my desk, I had a missed call from an unknown number. I ignored it at first. A few minutes later, I received a voicemail. The man identified himself as an officer with Immigration and Customs Enforcement and requested a call back regarding an ongoing inquiry. That is the moment it stopped being about embarrassment. I stepped outside before returning the call. He was direct. He said they had received a tip along with video evidence suggesting potential intent to commit marriage fraud. He asked if I was willing to answer a few questions. I said yes, because at that point, pretending it was a joke would have been the only reckless move left. I called the officer back from outside the building. He kept the tone professional and neutral. He confirmed my name, confirmed that I had been in a relationship with Alina, and asked whether I was aware of the Instagram live that had circulated. I told him I had seen it and that it was the reason I ended the relationship. He asked whether we were engaged or had discussed marriage. I said we had talked about a future in general terms, but there were no plans, no ring, no paperwork. Then he asked the question that actually mattered. Had she ever indicated to me that she intended to marry for the purpose of obtaining immigration benefits? I paused for a second because I wanted to answer precisely. I said she had suggested that marriage would resolve her status issues and that she had framed it in a practical way rather than a romantic one. I clarified that I never agreed to participate in anything fraudulent. He asked if I would be willing to provide a written statement if necessary. I said yes. After I hung up, I felt something unexpected. Not panic, not guilt, clarity. The situation had moved out of emotional territory and into documented reality. That evening, despite being blocked, she managed to get a message to me through a mutual friend. The message was simple. ICE contacted me. What did you say? I did not respond directly. Instead, I told the mutual friend to tell her that I answered truthfully. Nothing more. Within an hour, another message came through. She said I was overreacting and that if I just clarified it was sarcasm, this would disappear. She called the entire process dramatic and said Americans love to ruin lives over misunderstandings. That language stood out. Not an apology, not concern about what she said, just frustration that consequences existed. 2 days later, I got confirmation that she had been detained pending a hearing related to her visa overstay and the investigation. When she finally reached me through a monitored call, her first words were not "I am scared." They were "You need to fix this." The call was short and monitored. She sounded controlled, not panicked. That almost unsettled me more. She said they were accusing her of intending to commit marriage fraud and that the video was being treated as evidence of intent. She said all I had to do was submit a statement clarifying that we were planning to marry out of love and that her words were exaggerated for social media. I told her I would not lie. I said I would confirm that we dated and that no marriage had been planned. Nothing beyond that. Her tone sharpened immediately. She said couples protect each other. She said I was letting the government define our relationship. I corrected her. I said her own words defined it. She accused me of being scared of authority. I said I was unwilling to create criminal exposure for myself. There was a pause after that, like she was recalculating. Then she tried a different approach. She said if she were removed, it would be because I refused to help, that it would be on my conscience. I answered carefully. I said your visa overstay existed before the video. I said the video was your decision. I said my responsibility is to tell the truth about my involvement. The call ended without resolution. No apology. No goodbye. The next week moved quickly. I provided a written statement consistent with what I had already said. No embellishment. No speculation. Just dates, facts, and the sequence of events. Her hearing was scheduled sooner than I expected. I was asked to appear and answer limited questions about the nature of our relationship. Walking into that courtroom felt strangely administrative. There was no drama. Just paperwork, attorneys, and a judge reviewing timelines. When I took the stand, I kept everything precise. We dated for over a year. We were not engaged. She had suggested marriage in connection with resolving her immigration status. I never agreed to that purpose. She watched me like I had crossed a line. But the line had already been crossed. Just not by me. The hearing itself was procedural. There was no dramatic confrontation. Her attorney argued that social media exaggeration is common and that intent cannot be proven by one reckless sentence. The government attorney pointed out that her visa had already expired months earlier. The video did not create the violation. It highlighted intent layered on top of it. When her lawyer questioned me, he tried to establish that our relationship was serious and progressing. He asked if we discussed a future. I said yes in general terms, like most couples do. He asked if I had ever considered marriage. I said I had not made plans or taken steps toward it. Then he asked directly whether Alina had told me she was using me. I answered carefully. I said she publicly stated she was with me for a green card and had privately framed marriage as a practical solution to her status. I clarified again that I never agreed to participate in anything fraudulent. At one point she interrupted and said I was twisting her humor into a confession. The judge told her to let her attorney speak. That moment mattered. It showed the same impulsiveness that led to the live stream. After my testimony, I stepped out into the hallway. I was not hoping for a specific outcome. I was hoping for closure. A week later, I received notice that she had been ordered removed based on overstaying and evidence suggesting intent to commit marriage fraud. The video was not the only factor, but it was cited. She called me once more before departure. The tone was flat. No anger this time. She said I could have protected her. I responded that I did not create the situation. She said I chose the system over her. I said I chose not to lie. There was nothing else to say after that. She was removed within the month. I did not go to the airport. I did not send a message. There was nothing productive left to say. For a while, I expected some dramatic fallout. Angry posts from her friends. Accusations online. Something. Instead, it faded quickly. The internet moved on. People at work stopped mentioning it. The situation closed administratively and socially at almost the same pace. About 3 weeks after she left, one of her friends reached out to return a couple of small things she had left in a shared locker at the office. The friend tried to frame the entire situation as a tragic misunderstanding. She said Alina was under pressure and that I could have softened my testimony. I explained that softening facts under oath is called lying. That ended the conversation. What I kept replaying was how close I had come to normalizing everything before the video. A month earlier, she had directly asked if I would consider marrying her sooner rather than later because her status was complicated. At the time, I treated it as impatience. Now I see it as escalation. If she had never gone live, if she had just kept pushing privately, I might have been pulled into something incrementally. First a courthouse ceremony, then joint bank accounts, then immigration interviews where we would have to rehearse a shared narrative. Instead, her own overconfidence accelerated the timeline. She said the quiet part out loud, publicly, repeatedly. Some people have asked whether I regret not defending her as sarcasm. I do not. Because even if the court had dismissed the intent angle, the underlying issue would remain. I do not want to be with someone who sees partnership as leverage. The relationship did not end in a shouting match. It ended in documentation. And documentation does not care about tone. It has been 6 months since the hearing. My life looks almost identical from the outside. Same job, same apartment, same morning routine. The only noticeable difference is that her name no longer appears on my phone in any form. I did a full reset after everything settled. Changed my apartment access code. Updated passwords. Removed her emergency contact listing. Not because I expected retaliation, but because clean breaks prevent messy returns. People sometimes ask if I feel responsible for how severe the outcome was. Deportation sounds dramatic when you say it out loud. But when I look at the sequence objectively, the outcome was tied to documented facts. Visa overstay. Public admission suggesting fraudulent intent. My testimony did not invent those elements. It confirmed them. I have thought about the version of events where I lie for her. Maybe she avoids removal temporarily. Maybe we rush into a marriage to legitimize the narrative. Maybe I spend years proving something that was never authentic in the first place. That scenario feels heavier than what actually happened. The most uncomfortable part for me was recognizing how easily I had rationalized her behavior before it escalated. She was blunt, but I called it honesty. She was dismissive, but I called it cultural difference. She tested boundaries, and I called it passion. It took a public statement and federal consequences for me to fully accept what was already visible. I do not hate her. I do not feel triumphant. I feel relieved. Relieved that I blocked her when I did. Relieved that I did not try to manage her narrative. Relieved that when asked directly under oath, I answered without distortion. If there is a lesson in this, it is simple. When someone tells you who they are, even jokingly, pay attention. Especially when the joke benefits them at your expense. The apartment is quiet now. Not lonely. Just uncomplicated. And I prefer it that way.